There are three common contributors that we see come up time and again when people are experiencing Achilles issues. And this week's episode of the Exercises Health Podcast, we want to identify for you what they are and what you can do about them. We're going to cue our introduction and dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercises Health Podcast, brought to you by Muscle Activation Schaumburg. We're your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
Today, we are discussing three common contributors that we see come up time and again when people are experiencing Achilles issues: Achilles tightness, Achilles pain, swelling or inflammation around the Achilles, things that may feel like, oh, I'm about to really hurt my Achilles. These things come up time and again, and they've been so consistent that we're like, all right, we got to share these with you. So that is what we are talking about today, but we want to let you know that if you want to start taking action on what we are discussing today, that's exactly what we can help you do at our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, where we specialize in using muscle activation techniques. All you need to do to see our availability and get on our schedule is go to our website, www.matschaumburg.com, click the big green button that says Get Started, and you can schedule yourself for your initial MAT consultation and assessment. So, Julie, these contributors, it really started off, I've been seeing people with Achilles issues for a decade and a half, basically, all right? And, there was always foot stuff going on, ankle stuff going on, and for a lot of people, it would be like, okay, like everything needs to get worked on. But what I started noticing this summer when I was working with a lot of professional basketball players that were experiencing Achilles issues is there were kind of like three main areas that kept coming up. And then I thought, okay, well, this is really interesting. Then when I started having some non-athletes, some non-professional basketball players that I was working with experiencing Achilles issues, these same three areas kept coming up. Now, it's not that other areas weren't influential. It's not that other things didn't need to get worked on, but these were the things that needed to keep getting worked on when somebody was experiencing Achilles issues. And so I was like, okay, I think there's something here. So I started to dive into why this might be, and that's what we want to identify for you today. That's what we want to explain to you, and then we want to talk about what you can do about all this.
You're right, Charlie. And when you're thinking about an area that's having, a lot of times when you have an Achilles issue, it's usually you're experiencing as like a lot of tightness, or it feels really pulling back there. And if you're not familiar, you're new to the conversation about Achilles, that's that area right that connects your calf into the back of that heel bone. So it's like that that little it looks skinny, but it's actually a really robust tendon that really lets your calves pull on the back side of your foot or that heel area. So when you're having an Achilles issue, you're usually sensing a lot of tension in the area, and it might feel like a lot of pulling or tender, and oftentimes also really weak. So like if you go and try to do something relative to your maybe good side, or when it wasn't symptomatic, you're feeling less powerful, less springy, less strong, and less stable in that area. And so when we're talking about this Achilles issue, we're not only going to be talking about like, how do we change, that terrible feeling of feeling tight back there? The bigger picture here is getting the environment that Achilles is living in to be better, to be stronger, to be more beneficial for the activities that you're going to be doing. Maybe you're, an athlete, a pro athlete, and we know that is a common issue with athletes, or maybe you're just someone that likes exercising. Either way, this information will apply to you.
That's exactly right. So let's get into it. All right, so what is this first common contributor? I was actually pretty surprised by this one, but again, it kept coming up time and time again. And the thing that it is subtalar supination. Now, if you're hearing that, you're like, what is that? It's basically when your foot forms an arch, or your heel kind of spins in. The bottom side of your heel spins in, allowing your foot to form an arch. That's what we call like subtalar supination. Okay, so think about, all right, well, what does that have to do with the Achilles? Well, again, remember the clientele, the population that I first saw this in was professional basketball players, and then I saw it, pop up with other populations as well. Is particular people who were more active, people who were spending a lot of time on their feet, running, or just a lot of time walking, things like that. Okay, so what does this have to do with it? Well, when you're doing activities on your feet, every single time you take a step, your foot is going to form an arch. all right? And that's where the subtalar supination kind of comes into play. However, if the muscles that are supposed to be creating that arch or creating that subtalar supination aren't doing their job well, an easy way for your body to compensate around that is by actually plantar flexing or pointing your foot down. In other words, the muscles that directly pull on the Achilles may have to start working harder in order to compensate for the deficiencies or the dysfunction with subtalar supination. And so if you can imagine that after enough time on your feet, enough steps, enough reps, this is going to start to put more stress on your Achilles because those muscles are having to work harder and harder and pull more and more on the Achilles more than they normally would.
And when you think about it like that, and you are like separated from your symptoms of how annoying your Achilles issue is right now, but when you think about it like that and you're like, wow, that's actually like a great solution. Like my body has created this great solution so that I can keep walking, keep doing the things that I want. It's not really the ideal muscle group, but those muscles that yank on your Achilles and put tension on your Achilles are having to work super hard because of the lack of function and the lack of strength in the muscles that help with subtalar supination. And so when we think about it that way, it's like, oh, okay, so like change this one scenario so that the stress can be more evenly distributed amongst the correct muscles and not just highlighted on the muscles that are really pulling hard and probably overworking, overcompensating that pull on that Achilles tendon.
Exactly. Now, the second big contributor that I saw was that the calves overall, their strength was relatively low. And I say relatively because it's all relative to the activities that the person is doing and the demands that they're putting on their body, okay? If somebody is playing high-level professional basketball, they're going to have a lot more force going through their Achilles on a repeated basis. They're going to be requiring a lot more strength from their calves on a repeated basis versus if somebody is active, but basically the most intense that they do is a fast-paced walk. Yes, they're going to have still some stress on their Achilles, multiples of their body weight from a stress and force standpoint going through their Achilles, but it's a fraction of what somebody who is, full out sprint and then stop and then cut and then jump as high as you can and then land from that and, doing that repeatedly for hours a day, multiple days a week, is experiencing as far as the stress and force through their Achilles. So it's a relative strength deficit relative to the activities and the requirements of the calves. But at the end of the day, there's a direct correlation between the strength of the calves and the strength of the Achilles. And so it's really hard to measure like tendon strength. It's a lot easier to measure muscle strength. And so it's easy to see, okay, well, the strength of the calves is not, up to where it needs to be for the activities that you're doing. It's harder to see, okay, the strength of the Achilles is not up to, the what's being required by the activities that you're doing. But generally speaking, if the calves get stronger, the Achilles will often get stronger as well. And so thereby, having stronger calves and strengthening the Achilles makes the Achilles more resilient and more tolerant to the high levels of stress and high levels of force that you are putting on it on a regular basis with the activities that you're doing.
You're totally right, Charlie, because when you think about the anatomy, like behind your shin bone, which is like where the calves are living, where the Achilles tendon is living, it's kind of like your calves are, kind of closer to your knee and they extend down, and then eventually it turns into a tendon called the Achilles tendon, and that's how that calf chunk connects into your heel. And so for some reason, the feet, the ankles, the toes is like the number one area that people rely on just general movement and general use to keep strong versus treating it like a regular muscle tendon group where you're like, hey, I'm going to progress this with some strategy. Like think about when you exercise, you go to the gym and you're doing like squats or presses with your arms or crunches, right? You think about like, okay, there's probably going to be a progression. Like, over time, I'll grab some heavier weights. I'll vary the programming. I'll think about what I want my arms to do and then maybe train them to, to be able to do that. When it comes to the feet and ankles and toes, that's not often the case. We think, well, I walk, so isn't that enough strengthening for my calves? I play basketball, so isn't that enough strengthening for my Achilles, right? We want to be thinking about like progressing the tolerance level of this group, of this area behind the shin bone, so that the tolerance can be higher. That way, like when you're out playing basketball, when you're out traveling, when you do that weird move, instead of it giving you that response of a twinge or a pull or a tug, your body's like, yeah, we got that. That's like in our wheelhouse. We've trained to that level so that you're less likely to flare up just because the general strength and conditioning and the tolerance level of that area is now way higher.
That's exactly right. Now, the third big contributor that I saw be extremely common when people were experiencing Achilles issues may actually be a little bit surprising to you because it's the exact opposite side of the body as where the Achilles lives. The Achilles lives on the back side of the body, but this area is on the front side of the body, and it's dysfunction within the ankle dorsiflexors, within the limited in motion with ankle dorsiflexion, limited as far as strength output into ankle dorsiflexion, and dysfunction within the muscles that control ankle dorsiflexion. So these are the muscles that live on the front of your lower leg near your shin, live on the tops of your feet, and connect into the tops or front side of your toes. And they help to point your foot up towards your knee, moving around your ankle, again, pointing that foot up towards your knee. The motion is called ankle dorsiflexion. And so what I saw time and again is when these muscles were dysfunctional, this group of ankle dorsiflexors was dysfunctional, Achilles issues were much more noticeable. However, by not even addressing the Achilles at all and just getting the muscles of ankle dorsiflexion functioning better and stronger overall, more times than not, Achilles issues calmed way, 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 way down. And part of the reason is because if your ankle dorsiflexors aren't functioning well, your ability to move into ankle dorsiflexion, your actual mobility of your ankle into ankle dorsiflexion will be more limited, okay? And why this is an issue is because if that ankle dorsiflexion motion is limited, with every single step that you take, you're going to be putting more and more stress on that Achilles as you're kind of passively shoving your foot and ankle into dorsiflexion beyond what you're actively able to produce. And so by improving the strength and the function of the muscles that take you into dorsiflexion, not only is that motion stronger and functioning better, the mobility also increases, which means every step you take, every time you run, every time you jump, every time you land from a jump, every cut that you do, everything like that, you have more ankle mobility to go into ankle dorsiflexion, which helps to relieve stress from the Achilles.
That's right. The number one sign that we get as MAT practitioners that there is like some muscle function problems happening is when your body tightens things up. And so oftentimes we see that in the muscle shortening side. So like what Charlie was saying with ankle dorsiflexion, that's like if you could imagine like pulling your toes up to your knee, right? If those muscles can't get short enough, then you can't move as far. And usually the way your body like stops you from moving far is by setting up some very intentionally and purposeful tightness that talks to you and hurts you and bothers you. It's like, it's totally there for a reason, right? It's like, if that dysfunction is there, we have to have a stopper. Your body sets up a stopper. And so what we find is that when we are seeing people with like symptomatic Achilles, that usually, it could be that those Achilles are acting as a stopper. Like they're on tension all the time because they're trying to stop a motion to protect from a dysfunction that's happening. And so we find that when we do get the front side of the shins, that front side of the ankle, the top of the toes, the top of the foot worked on, activated, those muscles can now fully shorten, and the Achilles is like, and the calves are like, hey, we don't have to like be the super protector anymore, and we can just go back to normal tension, normal function.
That's exactly right. So what do we do about this? Well, the first step for us is we need to assess your body to figure out where there is this dysfunction, where there is this breakdown in communication, where there is this muscle weakness. And that's exactly what we do with muscle activation techniques. Assessing your body, assessing the mobility of your joints, the contractile ability of all the different muscles of your body to figure out, okay, these group of muscles are contracting well, this group of muscles is not contracting well. And because of that, we're starting to get symptoms, starting to get issues creep up in these areas of the body. And so through the MAT process, not only are we able to assess and figure out where those issues are, but we're able to directly address them, improving the communication between the brain and nervous system and the muscles, getting the muscles to contract better. So when you do the activities that you want, whether you're a professional basketball player or you're just, walking around your house or anywhere in between, your muscles not only are strong and they're functioning well, you also have that joint range of motion, that joint mobility, to be able to go through your day and do your activities without getting this excessive stress on your more passive tissues.
That's right. It's like MAT is saying, hey, let's just make sure all the muscles are awake and ready to be strengthened and to be used. And when that happens, people find that they are way less symptomatic and less like, oh, I did that weird thing and this popped up, right? They're more resilient, right? But then that's where step number 2 comes in, which we kind of talked about just a little bit, but we gotta be strength training this area. This is such a big area that needs to be strengthened with intention rather than just with use. It needs to be strengthened not just when you're playing pickleball, but when you're in the gym. It needs to be strengthened not just when you're playing basketball, but when you're training in the gym. And so the first thing that we like to recommend to people is making sure that you are doing your isometrics. If you're not familiar with an isometric is when you hold a position, focusing on the muscle contraction, but you're not moving, right? So a great place to start would be to be doing isometrics for the motions of the ankles and the feet, especially the motions that we just talked about. So subtalar supination, or like that doming arching motion of your feet. You can also be doing them for your plantar flexion, which is like that calf raise. And then also the dorsiflexion, like the front side of the foot, squeezing through those top of the foot muscles, front of the ankle muscles, and up into your shin.
Exactly. Now, the thing about the Achilles in particular is it's designed to be able to handle a lot of force, like multiples of your body weight's a lot of force, okay? And so with that, in mind, when you go and you're doing your strength training, as long as your body's ready for it, don't shy away from loading this up, going heavy with it, even with the isometrics. There are some isometrics that we recommend doing that are very light in nature, but when we're talking about, really trying to strengthen the Achilles and helping the supporting areas, we're thinking about going heavier with these and really putting some force through this area to build up that strength of the Achilles, which kind of leads into the next thought from a strength training perspective, is what we call overloaded eccentrics, okay? And so an eccentric is kind of the lowering of the weight or the lowering part of the lift. So if you think about a squat, it would be the lowering of your body down. If you think about a bench press, it would be the lowering of, the bar towards your chest. So it's the lowering portion. And with the overloaded eccentrics, to an extent, you can do it where with a load that you're not even able to lift up, but you're just controlling the lowering down. Like that's the intensity of like heaviness that we're thinking about with these, is like you might need 2 feet to like lift it up, and then you lower it down with 1 foot. But you couldn't lift it with 1 foot. You can lift it with 2, but you're lowering it with the 1. And so that's what we're thinking about from an intensity standpoint with these overloaded eccentrics. Because again, like your Achilles is designed to be able to handle a lot of force, but just like every area of your body, if you're not consistently putting a lot of force through it and giving it those signals to get stronger, to get thicker, to be able to handle high levels of force, that capability to handle high level of force will go away over time. And so we want to be signaling to your Achilles in the surrounding areas that, hey, like it's time to get stronger. It's time to thicken up. It is time to, make sure that you can handle everything we're about to do. Overloaded eccentrics is a way to do that.
And overloaded eccentrics happen in your daily life. Again, we're not saying you should train them by daily life, but even if you're not an athlete, you do overloaded eccentrics. I know a lot of times you're going to think about this from landing from a jump or doing a cut, or you're running and you turn around or whatever. But in a normal person's daily life, like a non-athlete, like let's say you're on a trip and you're stepping off of a bus, or you have a really big step to come down, or you have to do a little hop from here or there, or a lot of people, when they stand up from a chair, they actually kind of tuck their foot back right? And that have that dorsiflex forced position, those are all things that will get better and stronger by doing overloaded eccentrics, not just for athletes. Now, the last thing we want to encourage you to do when you're strength training is heavy concentric. So heavy concentric is the opposite of the eccentric. So the eccentric is when the muscle is getting longer. The concentric is when the muscle is getting shorter. So on a calf raise, that would be like the lift up, right? Whereas we just talked about the eccentric, which is the coming down. So you want to feel like you're loading your concentric motions very, very heavy also. So doing your calf raises with a really heavy load, making sure you're doing your dorsiflexion, your toe raises with a really heavy load. So making sure that all these motions are getting heavily loaded so that they are trained to be more tolerant of forces.
So again, these are three common contributors that I've seen and that Julie has seen come up time and again when people are experiencing Achilles issues, both with professional athletes and with non-athletes, people that are active on their feet, but they're not competing at that ultra high level, but they're extremely active throughout their life and they're experiencing Achilles issues. And we see that these three things are very common contributors in all those demographics. And so if you are experiencing some kind of Achilles issue and you've been cleared by your doctor for regular exercise, these are things that we'd recommend you at least considering and thinking about, not only from a strength training perspective, but also from a muscle activation techniques perspective. And so if you're in the Chicagoland area or willing to travel to the Chicagoland area and would like to experience muscle activation techniques, that's exactly what we can help you with at our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. All you have to do to see our availability and get on our schedule is go to www.matschaumburg.com, click the big green button that says Get Started, and you can schedule yourself for your initial MAT consultation and assessment. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week for this conversation. We always appreciate your time and attention, your eyes on YouTube, your ears on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume our content every single week. Share this episode with somebody who may be experiencing Achilles issues, doesn't know which way to turn, how to think about it, so they can get some perspective on things that may be contributing to what it is that what they are experiencing. If you wouldn't mind leaving us a rating and review on whatever platform you consume this content on, we always appreciate that. And we are wishing you a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.